Hi everyone, Ben from Freemius here. On our last video, we reviewed the advantages of submitting your plugin or theme to the WordPress.org repository and touched briefly on the downsides of doing so. On this video, we'll continue to cover the downsides of distribution through the repo and mention an alternative at the end. Let's plug right in! Before we get started, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel for future videos. If you're watching this directly on YouTube, you can click the alert icon for notifications about new releases. One of the main hurdles you'll have to pass when submitting your plugin or theme is the review process. The WordPress.org review process is handled by just a handful of community members voluntarily. While the process for plugins is only a matter of days, if you are a theme developer, prepare yourself for a tedious review that can take a month in a good period, but sometimes can also take 3, 4, or even 6 months. After completing the review process and getting your plugin or theme listed on the repo, you're still not off the hook. The review team follows a no-tolerance, suspension-first approach, which many developers find too aggressive. Basically, if at any point of time your product doesn't comply with the guidelines, it will be removed first, and only later will you get an email including the reason and what needs to be resolved to get it back on the repo. It can often catch you by surprise and be quite unpleasant if you are an indie developer that is traveling to a WordCamp, for example, or worse, if you're on a vacation on some remote island. Another downside is that WordPress.org requires everything you package with your product to be 100% GPL, including files like JavaScript and images that are not necessarily derivatives of WordPress. While some of that can be protected with copyrights and trademarks, this requirement weakens your intellectual property and makes it easier for others to replicate your product and distribute it legally. Being required to license the entire product as GPL opens you up to a whole lot of risk in the form of trolls who might try to steal your product and redistribute it as their own work. Though it's largely inevitable in the WordPress space that someone who purchased your product can steal the code and sell it as their own, by trademarking your brand or product name, you can better fight against this kind of unlawful activity. And there's a lot more detail about that on the Freemius blog. Even though there are challenges for private businesses operating within the GPL space, complying with GPL allows our community to remain inclusive so that everyone can learn from each other's work, and businesses most often don't see life-threatening challenges when it comes to this risk. Another weak point of the repository worth mentioning is that its unmoderated rating system is highly susceptible to user abuse. In the digital world, and with all the competition around, your product rating plays a big part in your overall reputation, and it can make or break a business. Since the repository is open to everyone, from beginners to WordPress masters, it's just a matter of time until you get a bad review from someone who installs your product without even knowing exactly what it does, expecting it to function like a spaceship when you clearly stated that it's a bike. Some users will even use it as leverage by threatening developers to fulfill the requirements, or otherwise they will publish a 1-star review. Finally, you might encounter a troll who just wants to cause harm by leaving a low rating for no good reason. The bottom line here is that the repo's admins usually won't take accountability for review abuse unless it's a very exceptional case, and you'll be left trying to figure out how to increase your star rating. And it won't be easy. Another major downside of the WordPress.org repository is that it doesn't include any actionable data about usage of your plugin or theme. You only get basic stats on the product version's distribution, number of downloads, estimate number of active installs, and that's pretty much it. This makes it practically impossible to make any intelligent data-driven decisions, keeping developers blind to important data like who are your users, where do they use your product, and how. To overcome this issue, you can integrate third-party solutions like Freemius to instantly start collecting user data through an opt-in mechanism, all in compliance with the repo's guidelines. This type of simple data collection lets you make powerful decisions about your product development and marketing efforts. Last but not least, your work as a WordPress product owner doesn't end with your product launch on the repo, especially if you have several products that gain traction and become popular. With many active installs comes great responsibility for supporting your free users. Here's where the trouble might start. First, if you want users to keep using your products, you will have to answer their questions and to attend to their needs through the repository's forums in the hope that someone will become a paying customer. In the meantime, you'll need to work hard for users who don't pay a dime to use the plugin or theme. Second, the support forum on WordPress.org is public, and there is no way to exchange private messages with your users. So, if, for example, you'd like to troubleshoot an issue that requires sharing sensitive information like the user's email, you can't do it. Also, you are not allowed to provide premium support on WordPress.org forums by definition. So, whether you like it or not, you'll have to manage at least two separate systems to support your free users and paying customers, which opens the door to chaos. After letting these disadvantages sink in, it's easy to see the flaws in this very popular repository. And that's just from the developer's perspective. You, as the developer and creator of the product, need to realize that from the admin side of things, it isn't a walk in the park either. That's only a partial list of guidelines and restrictions the repository imposes on developers even before starting the approval process. And while it is true that these requirements are good for the community as a whole, they do make the review process and ongoing compliance much more challenging. I hope that after watching this two-part series, you'll be able to make a better decision for your WordPress business about whether or not to distribute your plugin or theme through the WordPress.org repo. In any case, this decision should only be made after considering all the pros and cons. There are, of course, alternatives to the repo. You can distribute your free products directly from your website or even publish your code on GitHub, which has its own ticketing system, wiki, and sharing capabilities. Though naturally you'll be missing out on the massive distribution of the WordPress repository, as most users don't search for WordPress products on GitHub. That concludes our two-part mini-series on the pros and cons of submitting your product to the repo. If you want to stay up to date with our latest videos, be sure to subscribe. See you next time. Hi everyone, Ben from Freemius here. On our last video, we reviewed the advantages of especially if you have several products that gain traction and become popular. With many active